Welcome to Caliphas. Congratulations! You have learned about Lowell's plan to unleash the Old One, Jamandur, on Galarian by obtaining the Necronomicon. You have stopped the cult of Hastur from operating in Thrushmoor. Yea, it is safe to walk the streets again. You have eliminated the witch coven that was going to bring back the Briarstone Witch and destroy the world. You have stopped Melisandre from releasing the Briarstone Witch from Carcosa by destroying the Star Stele. You have stopped the Deep Ones and the Migo from destroying Thrushmoor. And you have destroyed Cassius Septima before he could unleash the power of Shub-Niggurath, the Black Goat, and become a dark god. Unfortunately, 2 party members were lost during the encounter with the Wendigo. They will be missed. So, what should you do now? Travel to Caliphas? Meet up with Graylin's order at the Haraday Theater? Find Arabella's airship, also in Caliphas. Learn the ritual to travel into the Dreamlands. You know that you need the help of the Mad Poet to find and to stop Lowell's. Find out if this Yithian alien can really help you. Learn about these asshole gnolls in Okino who are holding the Yithian prisoner. Yes, these are the same gnolls that enslaved Angelica. So let's take a closer look at the city of Caliphas, your new destination. Caliphas is a large cosmopolitan city. Unlike the rural parts of Ustaloth, Caliphas is a rich and sophisticated metropolis. The city of Caliphas is the capital of Ustaloth and is the largest city in the country. It rests on the shores of Lake Incarthen. It is a very rich city. Some might even say it's decadent. The city is also very cosmopolitan and heterogeneous, a relative rarity in suspicious Ustaloth. It is also a very dangerous city. Many travelers visit from foreign places. Some of these visitors never leave. Their disappearances rarely noticed by the population. There are many ways to go missing in Caliphas, none of them very good. Let's take a look at the map. Here is Varisia, a region that you are familiar with. If you look down here, you can see the city of Korvosa, city that we've spent a lot of time in. If you go to the east, you will see the southern and northern Fangwood Forest. That's where IFI is taking place. And here is Lake Incarthen. And on the north shore of Lake Incarthen is the port city of Caliphas. Here we have a close-up view, and you can see here is Thrushmoor. Here is the city of Ilmarsh that you guys traveled to, and you can see that Caliphas is down here on the shore. It's a few days' walk from Thrushmore, but there's no problem traveling there. The path is well worn. Let's put it that way. Here is a close-up of the city. You can see that it is a port city. It has a great harbor, a fortified harbor. There are also numerous castles. There are a lot of castles in Caliphas. Some of the castles date back to the age of the Whispering Tyrant. Those of you who know your Galarian history will know who the Whispering Tyrant was. There's kind of a walled city here, the interior of Caliphas. There's a port area. This port area contains also the place where the airship hangars are. So if you're looking for Arabella's airship, that might be a good place to start. In this area of the walled city, there's all the administrative buildings, including the government building and the Maiden's Choir Cathedral, the largest church of Pharasma in Galarian. In these outlying areas, there's a lot of housing. It's tightly packed. There's a high population. There's an art district. There's a merchants district. This is where the Heriday Theater is, the area where you're going. So there's a lot of different areas in Caliphas that you have to familiarize yourself with. So when we think about the culture of Caliphas, one of the things that will stand out to you is the number of vampires, the community of vampires that live in Caliphas, and they live openly, and they live under the leadership of one Luvic Sirvaj, and they have a treaty with the living that bans them from coercive feeding inside the city. And generally this rule is followed. And as you would expect, there is some tension between the vampires and the Pharasmans, the Church of Pharasma. But of course, it is a cosmopolitan city, and one thing about living in a cosmopolitan city is you do get used to living alongside of people that you disagree with. Now, how do the vampires feed, you might ask, if they cannot feed coercively? Well, guess what? There are throngs of followers, young people who follow vampires and give them access to their bodies freely. Not really a surprise. In fact, being a vampire is so fashionable in Caliphas that so many young nobles dress like vampires that it can be very difficult to tell who's a real vampire and who's just a poser. Now, there is also a sprawling vampire community under the ground, under the city streets, in the sewers. There's an extensive sewer system in Caliphas. Now, here the rules are different. The living are not welcome underground. In addition to vampire communities who will feed on you underground, there are hundreds of feral vampire spawn that prowl the sewers, and no one controls them. So stay above ground if you want to remain alive. There are also many, many witches. Some of the witches are affiliated with covens, but there are also independent witches who operate outside the authority of a coven. One thing that all the witches have in common is that nobody fucks with them. It is a very bad idea to mess with any of the witches. Also, be very, very careful around cats. Caliphas is a city of cats, and you really don't know if that is an ordinary cat or somebody's familiar. And boy, you do not want to mess with a witch's familiar. So be very careful around cats. Caliphas is filled with ghosts. In fact, it's the most haunted place in all of Galarian. And there are particular areas of Caliphas, like Ashtown and Brookman's Alley in Ashtown, that are so haunted that the residents have to brick up doors and windows to prevent access from certain malicious and mischievous ghosts. And like, anyone else, if you live in these areas, you just get used to dealing with the supernatural. It's just a fact of life. Now, because of the constant rain, fog, and smoke, the sun is rarely seen in Caliphas. In fact, if the sun does come out, you will not feel normal. It's kind of disconcerting. But if the sun does come out, at least momentarily, you will see that Caliphas is an extraordinarily beautiful city. You will be treated to many fine examples of beautiful high Gothic architecture. It is stunning. So Caliphas is a very, very beautiful city in some ways, at least architecturally. But of course, even its great beauty has a sense of ghostliness and eeriness, and there's something that's just not right about the city for most ordinary people, right? Now again, here is an extreme close-up of the city. It has a very big population, and you can see the port, you can see the harbor, you can see all of the castles. There are numerous castles, again, some going back to the era of the Whispering Tyrant. You can see the walled area of the city and the ports. There is a very famous bar down here by the ports. It's called the Houndstooth Inn. There are the administrative buildings here, Maiden's Choir Cathedral. The Hereday Theater is over here, where you guys will be staying outside the walled area of the city. But it is a very large city, and it is it has a pretty densely populated inner city and some suburbs. Now, notable districts include the Ashtown districts, and this is where the docks are. A lot of industry here. There's always smoke. This is where a lot of the tenements are, gambling, prostitution. It is also where Brookman's Alley is, where a lot of the ghosts are. A lot of people end up missing here. A lot of bodies turn up in the water here. It's a very, it's a working class, but there's a lot of crime down here. The Houndstooth Inn is a very famous inn down in this area. It's packed every night. There are artisans, craftsmen, laborers, stevedores, dock workers. The drinks are cheap and only lightly watered down. The Escort District is really the oldest district in Caliphas. This is inside the walled city. The palace is here. There are numerous castles. There's a lot of government buildings. This is where government employees live. Maiden's Choir Cathedral is here. There are many prominent estates, very old estates of the most powerful nobility in Caliphas are located in the Escort District. Now, this is where Maiden's Choir Cathedral is, and this is the largest temple of Pharasma in all of Galarian, and it is astounding. It is a high Gothic cathedral. It is extraordinary. It is huge. The vaults inside the cathedral are just astounding. This is, by the way, where Winter was from. She was an official in the Church of Pharasma. The Church of Pharasma is kind of loosely connected or associated with the government of Caliphas, and so to have standing in the Church of Pharasma is you have a little bit of clout here, for sure. Now, Castle Balatz is the kind of gateway into the walled portion of the city. And all merchants and newcomers to Caliphas must register here. You must go through the fortress itself, and taxes and assessments will be collected, levies are collected, and travelers are documented. Now, I will just say that the government of Ustalav in general, and in Caliphas in particular, is not particularly repressive. It's pretty lax, and like I said, there's a lot of crime and a lot of wrongdoing that go on. But there are a lot of cults, and there are a lot of organizations that are banned by the government because there's just a lot of treachery, and there's a lot of occultism, and there are people who are working against the government. And so the government does take an interest. Prince or Dante is the leader of the government, and of course, like any government, it takes an interest in staying in power, and so they are always on the lookout for cult members and the cults of Ergothoa, or people who are trying to, resurrect the Whispering Tyrant or something like that. And so there's a lot of that stuff that happens, and that's an easy way to find yourself either just, lingering in a dungeon, or being arrested by the royal accusers or some government inquisitor, or simply disappearing. So again, try not to become involved in any cult. Castle Straite is the seat of Ustalov's government. This is where the prince lives, and of course it is the perfect setting for treachery and occasionally, backbiting and fighting with the royal families and the high nobility of Ustalav. There is a lot of treachery and occasionally an assassination or something that goes down. And so, like any other place, only worse, right? The treachery is pretty bad here. The Valpole district is a working class district filled with tenements and row houses. The poor end up here, migrant workers end up here, and the lower middle class. So there is some crime here, for sure. The Laurel Light Hill district is also a very old district of Caliphas, and some of the older houses, the older noble houses, have estates here. Actually, including the Lowell's family. Remember, most of the Lowell's family, no one really wanted to go to Thrushmore, and most of the Lowell's family stayed in Caliphas. And in fact, I think that part of the problem for Hazerton Lowell's the fourth was that he was very important in Thrushmore, but not so important in Caliphas, and nobody took him seriously in Caliphas. And so I think that part of his psychology can be explained by the fact that he could just never make it here. A bit about the Kelids. The Kelids are like the Shoanti. They were the indigenous people who were pushed out by the people who eventually settled and colonized Ustalav. And there are numerous families of Kelid descent living in Caliphas, but they all live in a slum area called the Karens district. and they are so packed into the Karen's district that they have been forced underground. And so there are underground mazes of cellars and tenements where it's just packed with thousands of people. Now, one fact about the Kelids is that they worship the old gods. Now, Caliphas, or Ustalav in general, there are many faiths in Ustalav. Primarily the faith of Pharasma. But worship of the old gods is forbidden. And it's forbidden for a particular reason, because many of the cults that are associated with the old gods are, aiming for treason, for treasonous activities like assassinations and overthrowing the ruling order of Caliphas. And so it's not so much a religious objection, but these cults of the old gods are seen as politically threatening. And so it's another reason that the Kelids are oppressed and in Caliphas. Now, the spiritual leader of the Kelids is a blind oracle, a very old woman named Brynan Koraseed, and she is actually the oldest resident of Caliphas, and she is regarded as the grandmother and leader by much of the impoverished Kelid population. And she is also somebody who has a great deal of knowledge about the old ones and the Briarstone Witch. And so she could potentially be a good source of information. However, you know that the Kelids are likely to be hostile to outsiders. Now, the North Cushing district is outside the walled city, but it is a fantastic place. It is filled with small businesses, merchants, artisans, a lot of shopping, and the city's finest costume shop is still there. And this is where the Heroday Theater is. A caustic smell permeates this part of the city because of the high number of practicing alchemists. There's alchemists everywhere. And this area also has some of the best magic shops in Galarian. You can buy stuff in Caliphas that you simply cannot find anywhere else. There are a lot of really great magic shops. And if you're good at shopping, there are bargains to be had, right? So there are big places that cater to the general public, but if you know what you're looking for, you can find specialized places and get a very, very good deal on magical supplies. Now, the Heroday Theater, which is your destination, because this is where Graylin's order hangs out. It's a kind of run-down building. It's a very large building, but it's kind of run down. It's a little past its glory days. Back in the day, it was the most popular theater in Caliphas, and it hosted operas and major theater productions. It doesn't really do that anymore. Occasionally a play or something is put on at the Heroday Theater, but mostly it's kind of just used as a meeting house today. Now, the Heroday Theater is the home of the esoteric order of the Palatine Eye. And the order's members began just hanging out at the theater, but now they have leased the theater from the Church of Abadar. There's an interesting story here that during the Corvosan Revolution, members of the order actually went to Corvosa and helped overthrow the evil queen. As a gesture of gratitude, a woman who was an official in the Church of Abadar named Cora arranged for the Church of Abadar to buy the Hereday Theater so the esoteric order would have a place to meet. And I think they have they pay a nominal fee to the Church of Abadar. Maybe the Church of Abadar gets a huge tax break or something. But they have like a 300-year lease on the building. And that's where the esoteric order of the Palatine Eye, they hold their meetings. So while the theater does occasionally hold productions and is used by the community at times, it is mostly just a place for the esoteric order of the Palatine Eye to meet and to hang out. And it is an extensive building. It has of course, it has the old theater, but it also has an extensive basement that has been converted into a kind of library, and it's filled with esoteric works. There's an alchemist workshop at the back of the building. There are sleeping quarters. There are rooms for dedicated rooms for experimentation. It is just kind of a unique place that people are welcome to come and to hang out. If you have an interest in the occult, if you have an interest in just knowledge in general, you can find somebody to talk to there that will share your interest. Order started simply as a collection of dilettantes and academics who had an interest in the occult, and they would simply go to coffee shops and talk about it. But it quickly grew. It just took off, and it attracted the attention of people who actually had expertise in a variety of fields. And it became a place where people could kind of cross-pollinate. Ideas could cross. You could talk with experts in other fields and get a sense for what was going on. And so it did rapidly kind of become an elevated order of sorts, a place where people could go to seek out expertise from people who were knowledgeable in a variety of different fields. So what began centuries ago, really, as a cabal of mystics and dilettantes and just interesting people exploring forbidden knowledge, now is an organized network of scholars, philosophers, judges, academic deans, landed aristocracy, and even high-ranking clergy of the Pharasman Church. They promote enlightenment through participation in secret meetings and mysterious rituals, and sometimes they just get together and drink. Now, you know that Lowell's entered the Dreamlands on his quest to find the Necronomicon, and he talked to a figure called the Mad Poet. You guys have an idea that you will have to enter the Dreamlands to find a way to stop Lowell's. You don't know much about the Dreamlands, but you do know, Grayland has told you, that there are people in the Order who do know a great deal about the Dreamlands. And in fact, he knows a young woman who is an expert. Well, she appears to be a young woman at least. And she is an expert on the Dreamlands, although she does have kind of a quirky personality. Now that you know, to access the Dreamlands, there is a ritual that has to be performed. And you will have to learn the ritual, and you have to perform the ritual at night, and it does take several hours. And there is a potential consequence if the ritual fails, and that consequence is not good. You also know that there are rules to traveling in the Dreamland, including death doesn't affect you in the way it does on the material plane. So if your character dies in the Dreamlands, generally that will not kill you, your character, on the material plane. There are exceptions, however. There are places where that rule doesn't apply. Death in the Dreamlands can, however, result in madness or constitution drain or something else that's bad happening to you, so avoid death if you can. Good advice. Now, your Dreamland self retains all abilities and equipment you have on the material plane. This is kind of like the residual image in the Matrix. So you look like you do on the material plane, and you have the stuff in your possession that you perform the ritual with. Equipment, spells, conditions, and abilities acquired in the Dreamlands, however, do not travel back to the material plane. They will be available to you when you return to the Dreamlands. So you do have to keep track of that stuff, and it is a good idea to keep a separate character sheet so you can track the progression of both of your characters, your Dreamland self and the material self. Spell casting, if you're a caster, and magic can be unpredictable in the Dreamlands. And this, like, even if you cast a relatively basic spell, things can go wrong because spell magic just doesn't work the way it works on the material plane. Now, your material body will fall into a coma, like sleep, when you're traveling in the Dreamlands. This makes you very vulnerable, and it can be dangerous. You have experienced this before in the Asylum. You began this campaign in the Dreamlands. You didn't know it, but you were in the Dreamlands. And your material bodies were vulnerable while you were in that coma. So you have to be very careful about where you perform the Dreamlands ritual. Now, how do you wake up from the Dreamlands? You have to perform a ritual. It takes a full round action and a concentration check. And I'll just tell you this, if you are in combat, that concentration check will be much higher. All right. Good luck and Godspeed.